Persia has been one of the most important and exceptional places for the development of poetry, a land that gave birth to some of the greatest voices in the history of human expression. From the early centuries, we find the great Sufi poets like Umar Khayyam, Al-Fardawsi, Jalal ad-Din Rumi, even the greatest Sufi poet of all time, Hafiz, and the great Attar. And many other Sufi poets are there whose words continue to shape hearts and minds today. But it wasn't only Persia. The Arabic world too gave us towering Sufi poets such as Sheikh al-Akbar ibn Arabi, the Sultan of Lovers Ibn al-Farid, whose poetry is soaked in longing and beauty, and my personal favorite, the profound and tender Abu al-Hasan al-Shushtari. Yet with all these towering names, there stands one poet who is strikingly different from the others, different from the very essence of his predecessors. His work flowing between poetry and prose is unlike anything before him. He's one of the most important and most celebrated Sufi poets of all time, and even regarded as one of the greatest Sufi poets of all time. He's known by many titles like the Master of Speech or the Master of Graceful Expression. He's remembered across centuries for the depth and wisdom of his words. He comes from a land named Shiraz, the luminous city of poets, and is known to the world as the Sheikh of Shiraz or Sheikh Saadi Shirazi. Sheikh Saadi or Saadi of Shiraz was one of the greatest classical Persian poets and prose writers. He was born in Shiraz around 1208 or sometimes also 1210, and even some scholars believe he was born in 1184. That means he lived at around 108 years. But majority of the scholars believe he was born somewhere around 1208 and 1210. He was orphaned early, but as a youth he went to Baghdad to study at the famous Nizamiya school, which was once also headed by the great theologian Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. But he came after Ghazali and studied under scholars such as Muhammad Khorasani and historian Ibn al-Jawzi. After his studies, he spent many years traveling widely throughout the Islamic world. When he finally returned to Shiraz in around 1257, Saadi was already celebrated as a wise poet. He composed his two masterpieces there, the Būstān, which means the orchard, and the Gulistan, the rose garden. Before dying in Shiraz in around 1291 and 1292, he was seen as one of the greatest poets that Persia has ever seen. Saadi lived through a turbulent age in the times of the Mughal invasion and the fall of Baghdad, yet he retained a balance of worldly insight and Sufi piety in his outlook. Encyclopedia Iranica notes his unique dual perspective. In the Bustan, he uses everyday scenes as a springboard to the spiritual, while in the Gulistan, he brings lofty spiritual lessons down to the hearts of his fellow wayfarers. There's one other book of his, most probably taken by others and then translated, known as Hikayat Saadi, which is one of the most beautiful and widely read books in the whole world, which consists of Saadi's anecdotes in Urdu and can be even seen as a translation for the Gulistan and also some anecdotes from the Bustan. Saadi lived through a turbulent age, but his style is still praised as simple and impossible to imitate. Rich in synonyms, wordplay, and internal rhyme, he often writes with humor, gentle irony, and sympathy. One scholar observes that this arises from his self-awareness and sense that no one is perfect. His central moral values and his concern for the suffering of others, or the fleeting nature of wealth and power, run through all his works. Saadi is especially celebrated for infusing love and compassion into his wisdom, often using concrete metaphors like rose gardens, musical instruments in his poetry to convey moral truth. As he says, quote, "To tell a falsehood is like the cut of a sabre. Though the wound may heal, the scar will remain. Saadi's own writings are full of first-person travel anecdotes. Though some are legendary, for example, he claims in Būstān to have slain a pagan priest in India, and some other stories. Some anecdotes are still debated over, like when he claims in Bustan to have been captured by crusaders in Syria and was freed by a Muslim merchant. Modern scholars such as Katouzian, I hope I have pronounced it right, he says that these episodes may be fictional, but agree that Saadi did journey widely into the Middle East, notably Iraq, Iran, Syria, Palestine, and Arabia. He performed the Hajj pilgrimage probably in the 1240s to 1250s and interacted with scholars in cities like Damascus, Mecca, and Baghdad. It's generally held that he did not actually travel to India, Khorasan, or even China, despite what some stories say. His roughly 30 years of travel, according to his account, deeply informed his writing. He observed courts and commoners alike, witnessed the chaos of Mongol conquests, and collected countless anecdotes. These experiences appear throughout his poems and stories, giving them a broad, worldly scope, even as they teach universal lessons. Saadi's reputation rests chiefly on two major works, plus some numerous shorter works, but these two works are one of his most famous books and even one of the greatest books in Persian literature. One of them, which is the Bustan, which is the orchard, which was written in 1257. The Bustan is written entirely in verse, or maybe we say as in Persian Masnavi, and is structured as moral tales and aphoristic poems. It's organized into 10 chapters on virtues such as justice, generosity, modesty, contentment, repentance, and many other things. Each chapter presents moral stories of dialogues to illustrate its theme. For example, in one tale of social justice, Saadi writes, "The poor man is affected by lack of bread, the king by the cares of his kingdom." Another story, Saadi says, involves a proud lord showing off his impregnable fortress. The reply is that the other kings before him had such forts, and Saadi said to him, "In the estimation of the wise, the world is a false gem that passes each moment from one hat to another." These lines exemplify his concern with humility. The impermanence of power and compassion for other people should be there always. You should know that power is indeed impermanent, and you should always have compassion for ordinary people. Bustan opens with a panegyric to God and ends with mystical praise, but most of its pages impart practical ethical advice through vivid mini-lectures and fables. The work was dedicated to Saadi's patron, the Atabek Abu Bakr, and immediately made the author famous across Persia for his moral insight. Saadi quotes, "The rose and the thorn, sorrow and gladness are linked together." This is an extract from his greatest work, the Gulistan, which was completed about a year after the Bustan. The Gulistan is written mainly in prose with scattered short poems. It's divided into 8 chapters on topics ranging from princely etiquette and spiritual discipline to love. He also talks about education, old age, and even the duties of society. Each chapter consists of dozens of anecdotes, maybe stories, maxims, entertaining dialogues, and many other ways of saying his anecdotes. Each anecdote is followed by a couplet or two of verse summing up the moral point. The tone of the Gulistan is more intimate and witty than the Bustan. Many of Saadi's most famous lines come from the Gulistan. For instance, his most celebrated poem, known as Bani Adam, or the Children of Adam, appear in chapter 1 of the Gulistan, known as the Custom of Kings, and it teaches universal compassion. And it goes like this, quote, "Children of Adam are limbs of one body, created of one essence. If one limb is afflicted with pain, the other limbs cannot remain at ease. You who have no sympathy for others' suffering do not deserve to be called human." This verse is quoted in United Nations headquarters in New York and is often quoted at international forums, and stresses that all people share common essence and must feel each other's suffering. Other memorable Gulistan anecdotes involve kings learning humility or lovers learning self-control. Saadi dedicated the Gulistan to another patron, and it remains perhaps his most quoted work, valued for its elegant style, humor, and practical wisdom. In addition to these works, Saadi composed hundreds of short poems and panegyrics. He is credited with about 700 ghazals, which are lyric poems mostly on themes of love and mysticism. These ghazals are collected in his divan, or known as the Kulliyat of Saadi or the Divan of Saadi, which is divided into several sections. The Ghazaliyat-e-Qadim, or the Ghazaliyat-e-Qadim of the youthful passion, or his The Khawateen of old age, he wrote many other qasidas or odes in praise of rulers and patrons. One famous example is an elegy lamenting the Mughal sack of Baghdad in 1258. Some of the work were in Arabic verse. A few Katouzian and panegyrics survive, but he left no major Arabic prose work. Overall, Saadi's literary output combined the devotional tone of the Sufi sheikh and the clear anecdotal style of worldly traveler. Saadi quotes, "The beloved of the Almighty are the rich who have the humility of the poor, and the poor who have the generosity of the rich." Saadi here kind of subverts social status, where he says that true nobility indeed comes from character and not wealth. Saadi's voice is marked by warmth, wit, and humanity. He frequently uses metaphors and allegory, like gardens and roses, which represent beauty and knowledge, or musical instruments and strings represent the soul, and so on. According to scholars, he balanced practical wisdom with spiritual insight. In Bustan, Saadi uses the mundane world as a springboard beyond the earthly realms. In the Gulistan, he lowers the spiritual to touch the heart of the fellow wayfarers. He excels at aphoristic storytelling, brief anecdotes or fables that carry a punchy moral line. Saadi's language is generally simple and conversational, but yet polished. Encyclopedia sources note he achieved a simple style grounded in a semantic web of synonymy, homophony, and oxymoron. Common themes in his poetry include empathy for others. He repeatedly admonishes us to elevate the pain of our fellow human beings. The ephemeral nature of worldly power, no place or pride endures in the world, and his value of moderation, contrasting humility with arrogance, gratitude, and also with ingratitude. Love also features prominently in his poems. Some ghazals express mystical devotion to God, others affectionate human love. Critics emphasize Saadi's sense of irony and tolerance. He laughs gently at folly and advises patience, and is believed that moral insight should guide action. As one modern commentator puts it, Saadi's work celebrates love in all its manifold forms and achieves both gravitas and playfulness. The blend of earthly and heavenly wisdom makes his poetry memorable and widely accessible. Each of these lines reflects Saadi's concise moral insight and poetic imagination. His full ghazals and longer poems also include many beautiful lyrical passages, and his brief maxims like the above are especially famous. Saadi's influence on Persian literature and word letters has been immense. In Iran, he is revered as a national icon, and a grand mausoleum known as the Saadiya stands in Shiraz, where he is also buried. In this place, people regularly visit to pay respect to Saadi and also read his poetry, which is engraved on the walls. Each year, known as the Saadi Day, which is 21st of April, or the first or the best in Iranian calendar. Saadi says it's the day he actually finished the Gulistan, so people in commemoration of that gather in crowds and pay homage to the great poet. A crater on Mercury is even named Saadi in his honor. Saadi's Būstān and Gulistān became literally models throughout the Persian-speaking world. His poetry was memorized and quoted by countless later writers. For example, 13th, 14th century Indian poets like Amir Khusro and Hasan Shijzi express reverence for Saadi. Amir Khusro is said to have felt it was preposterous to write poetry in Saadi's lifetime, and Shijzi famously wrote that he had bought a flower from Saadi's Gulistan. Saadi's fame also crossed cultural boundaries. His Gulistan influenced the structure of Gauche's Westphalia's Divan and was translated into European language in the 17th century. Famous Western authors even quote him or adapted his tales. For instance, Pushkin alludes to Saadi in Onegin Nogin. Jean La Desfontaine uses Saadi's fables. Benjamin Franklin included one of Saadi's parables in his writings, and Ralph Waldo Emerson praised Saadi's wisdom, comparing it to the Bible. The 19th century French engineer Lazare Carnot even named his physicist son Saadi after the great poet Saadi Shirazi. On the global stage, Saadi's humanism has been honored as well. His Kantian Bani Adam was quoted by US President Barack Obama in a 2009 message to Iranians, and a hand-woven carpet inscribed with the poem hangs at the United Nations headquarters as a symbol of dialogue and compassion. In summary, Saadi occupies a unique place in every man's age of Persian letters. His concise and very accessible truths and his emphasis on empathy and virtue transcend cultural boundaries. Now the Persian writer combines universal moral appeal with such elegant style. His work remains standard reading in Iran and continues to inspire readers around the world. And I will see you next time.